morning. I'm David Renwick with Adapt Pharma. Pleased to be here this morning. I wanted to try and take a shot at trying to, challenge some convention. I think some of what we've talked about at this Congress and at other events in the past has really led us to sort of understand where we fit in as an industry and how we're viewed by our customer. It's certainly been fraught with a number of challenges over the years, and while I don't want to belabor the point, I do want to sort of provoke a bit of a response here. Why should we really care about what the customer thinks? First we have to understand who our customer is. In fact, they're very diverse, and there are a number of them out there depending upon what business we're in. But why should we care if, in fact, the industry itself is being, I would say, cornered into positions by governments in particular and payers and so forth, where we're being forced to just, complete forms and, submit requests for reimbursement and the like. It all becomes very transactional. And I think we're kind of being forced away from really our value set and what we value as both an industry and as individual companies. The headlines, though, are not very positive. When we consider that the headlines in the industry, and I think Kevin alluded to some of these as well, are really not in our favor in respect of things. One piece of U.S. evidence study did look at sort of perceptions by consumers and the general public on the whole. And you can see here that, and for me, I'll highlight at least one that is of particular importance to me, which is the fact that the perception that is that we do not bring any value to the marketplace, and that we put profits ahead of patient concerns. And I would argue that, and I'll make a case here, that at Adapt we've tried to change that storyline significantly. These are just some of the things that unfortunately we're being faced with in the media broadly, and there were some even as recently as yesterday, as Kevin alluded to. But I think it behooves us to sort of take this and try and turn this paradigm on its side. I know that the companies represented in this room aren't really the ones that are affected by a lot of this negativity. A lot of this comes out of the U.S., but I think really by association, we as an industry are being dragged down a certain path. And so these customers, the payers and that sort of thing that we're interacting with while they're wanting to take us down a path of, fill out our forms and do our BIAs and all the rest of it, I think what they're, really wanting to do is hear how we can add value. And so what I'll try and do is take you through a little bit of a case study with our product Narcan. But our product Narcan was launched back in 2016, and really what we set out to do was to focus on how could we change this paradigm, that the perception that we can't add value and that we are viewed as just a transaction. We had a completely different set of circumstances with this, given that the public health crisis that's upon us in the opioid overdose space is really quite a challenge. With Narcan, we had really a different kind of competitive set. We had no funding. We had a product that had some very unique attributes, but we were up against an entrenched competitor that had been around for 50 years in an injectable naloxone. But we knew that in order to substantially change the conversation and position our company as a partner, we also had to share our vision of how we would do so and how we could make an improvement in society. And that was when we really began meaningful discussions with governments and payers. When we first met with them, as you would expect, the conversation was, as I've alluded to, turned exactly as predicted to price. What's your best price? How are you going to help us get the lowest price? And before we address the price, we really wanted to set up the possibility that we could be viewed as a partner with government, a partner in addressing this massive crisis. And we did so by really describing how Narcan nasal spray could offer hope. And it was that hope that I think really sort of changed the paradigm of these conversations. And by hope, I mean we offer hope in the form of second chances, hope for individuals who have taken tainted street drugs, and hope for patients that are prescribed opioid medicines and that are potentially at risk of overdosing due to drug-drug interactions. We shared with the government payers sort of our firsthand understanding after we had visited a number of the customers that we had identified. A lot of these are very non-traditional customers for our industry, but nonetheless, we visited clinics and drop-ins and safe injection centers, and we met with a number of different officials. We also shared details of conversations that we had with public health officials and what it was that meant to, that our product could mean to them. And we shared, most importantly, we shared our vision that would see naloxone and Narcan nasal spray be as ubiquitous as cell phones, to be absolutely everywhere. In every first aid kit, every AED, every public building, every transit provider, a lofty task nonetheless. The reason? Simply because we knew that if naloxone was available everywhere, that anyone in this room, anyone without medical training could intervene in a life and death situation. But we also asked the payers themselves, said, what do you want? And this was, I think this might sound a little bit motherhood or a little bit obvious, but the reality is that I think we forget sometimes, as we're too busy filling out our forms, to really ask the payers what it is that they wanted. And what we quickly realized is that our mission, which was to save lives through the delivery of naloxone broadly throughout the community, was exactly the same thing as the government payers. And we asked them how they thought this could be achieved, and we asked what their limitations were. We asked what was important to them. And in fact, when we went to the PCPA, we then talked about, and we started every single conversation with the crisis at hand and what the role of naloxone could have in terms of how to change outcomes and in particular save lives. And then we discussed price. And so it was turning this equation on its side that I think led to a lot of the success that we have had. So, if I was to summarize, there are a number of steps that we took to try and reshape the conversation with the payers. And really, it goes with this, is that if we're going to change this conversation and change the perception that people have of us, we really need to do a couple of things. One was to avoid being just transactional, completing the forms and doing the steps. Of course, that's important, but we didn't want to just be transactional. We also needed to seek to understand the value that our customer is actually seeking. And that extends beyond payers for sure, but in the context of payers, it was really interesting for us to see how this played out with a number of key players. And then I think, we wanted to tell the customers what our purpose was. And that was how we started every conversation. And we allowed ourselves to share a vision and project what the outcomes could be. And that's what I mean when I was referring to hope earlier. We say that as an industry, we're committed to enhancing and saving lives, and I really do believe we mean this, and I think we all strive toward that objective each and every day. The Canadian industry can strengthen its customers' perceptions by focusing more on why we exist and talking about the value that we bring and bringing it back to how it is that we can save lives and continue to ask. So I intended to ask a very provocative question at the outset, which was, why should we care? Well, simply it's because we have to. And patients, payers, healthcare professionals, all of them are counting on us in order to do this. And I think that that has to be our raison d'etre and how we go forward. I'll share with you one final piece. In Canada, to sort of put this in context, and this is the same context we put in place with the payers that we serve, There were 4,000 deaths in 2017, and tragically, due to opioid overdose. And tragically, this number is going to continue to go up in 2018, as we've already seen with some early data. It is a massive problem, but the good news for us and for all of us here is that the governments that we worked with did agree. And I'm proud to say that we have secured listing in both, in all throughout Ontario, Quebec, and with NIHB. And what this means is that any of us in this room can go into a pharmacy at any time and ask for an naloxone nasal spray kit, and you will be provided it free of charge. We were successful in breaking down some barriers. Thank you for your attention.